me about the existence of God. And this little businessman who thought he was so smart, so intelligent, he was very bright, actually shook his finger in my face. And I was tired. It was the end of a lecture. And I looked over at my friend Bucky, 6'3", this huge guy, and I said, "Bucky, I'm a little tired tonight. Take care of this guy." And the guy couldn't figure it out. You know, he kind of shaky. He said, what do you mean? And I said, "This is my buddy Bucky, and he's here for guys just like you." And the guy kind of shook, and Bucky looked down at him, and this is what he said, Shawn. He said, "Sir," he said, "if this were 6 months ago, I would have taken you out in a back alley if you insulted a good friend of mine like that. But," he said, "you better be glad that there is a God, because he changed my life. So now I just want to hug you." And he reached out and hugged the guy.
Amazing.
The guy was amazed, you know.
Amazing.
The greatest evidence that God exists is Bucky's, whose hearts and lives are changed by the grace of God.
You know, I can say the same thing even on a personal note. I wasn't always a preacher. I was raised in a Christian home, but there comes a time when you ask questions. But my own heart's been changed. It's all the evidence that I needed. It's when and I've had the privilege as well as you of working with thousands of people who, when I see them come from witchcraft or from atheism or from a hard life or murder or prison, suddenly believing in God. It's amazing what God can do. You know, I've often heard it argued that it's impossible to prove or disprove the existence of God. And I suppose if you want to do it with a pocket calculator, there might be some truth to that statement. But in the final analysis, just because you can't quantify it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. For example, I could tell you that I really love my wife, but how would you measure that scientifically? You might try pointing to evidence, like the amount of time I spend with her or the way I speak to her. But that's not really quantitative scientific evidence, because you can't put love in a test tube and measure it. And maybe the existence of God is a little like that. When we look for absolute proof, the kind that would completely satisfy the scientific method, maybe we're trying to empirically quantify something that just doesn't work that way. Maybe when we do that, we're trying to measure the infinite in terms of ounces, grams, or gallons, and frankly, the Almighty just doesn't fit into a test tube. But that doesn't mean we don't have evidence. The Apostle Paul reminds us in Romans chapter 1 that we have plenty of it. In Romans 1:20 he writes, "For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." According to the Bible, there's enough evidence that nobody really has an excuse for not noticing the existence of God. And if you really want to come face to face with him, take a quiet moment and examine your own heart, because there is a divine spark there that confirms, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that we are more than just carbon-based life forms. In the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3 and verse 11, it says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity in their hearts." God has planted eternity in your heart. There is something inside your heart that tells you to reach beyond yourself. I have no question that somebody listening today has experienced disappointment. You've suffered the kind of crushing blows that make you doubt. And maybe you've been let down by people who call themselves Christian. But stop to think about it. Why is it you still have such an ache in your heart to know that